Welcome to Mr. Horror Tale, where we tell scary stories that really happened. We all take or have taken public transportation, whether it was a cab, a train, or a subway. All the protagonists of these stories were in the wrong time and place. Regardless of the means of transportation they chose to return home, they all had a date with death. To ensure you don't miss out on other horror contents, remember to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell. Story 1. How many of us take public a subway every day? We can use it to go to work, go for a walk, or see our family. We never think about the things that can happen there at night. I never thought anything could happen to me either, and so I always walked the subway distracted. Little did I know that I was being watched, and when I decided to act, it was too late. It all started one rainy day. I got on the train like any other day to go home after work. The dim light of the subway flickered as the train moved through the dark tunnels. I sat down in a worn seat and, as usual, started using Instagram to pass the time. It was then that I saw it for the first time. A shadow, barely noticeable, moved at the end of the subway car. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But as the train moved forward, the figure slowly approached. It was a man, but something was not right. His face was hidden under a hood, and his clothes were soaked as if he had been in the rain for days. I tried to ignore him, but I couldn't look away. When the train stopped at the next station, the figure slipped into the doorway and disappeared into the crowd. My nerves calmed a little, but the uncomfortable feeling persisted. In the following days, I saw him again. Always at the same station, always with the same stare. I began to wonder if he was following me. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, but I never saw him in the same carriage. He was always there, in the corner of my eye, waiting. Normally someone would just take a bus, change their schedule at work, or take a cab, but I wasn't like that. I was always a confrontational person, a person who asserts herself and never lets anyone walk all over her. So I decided to confront him, not knowing what I was getting into. That night I decided to get off at the terminal station. Everyone got off at the station before, so the platform is deserted, except for a flickering light at the end. This was no coincidence. I didn't just want to talk to this person, in case he was a pervert or something. I would teach him a lesson. When our eyes met, the figure was standing in the shadow, motionless. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his penetrating gaze. I stood a few feet away, feeling the tension in the air. There was no one else around, just the two of us in the deserted station. I was about to take my next step and confront him, but something caught me totally off guard. The man started walking toward me, and my survival instinct kicked in. I turned and ran up the stairs to the exit. His footsteps echoed behind me, and the sense of impending danger prompted me to run even faster. I exited the subway and found myself in the rain-soaked streets. I looked back, but the man was gone. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that maybe I had gotten rid of him. However, I didn't know how wrong I was. The next few days became a nightmare. I saw him everywhere. On the street, at my job, in my building. He was always there. It was no longer a question of him following me on the subway. This was much more personal. I began to lose sleep. Paranoia took over. No matter where I went, I always felt his eyes on me. One day, when I left work, he followed me to my building. I ran up the stairs, but when I got to my apartment, he was already there, waiting for me in the dark. It was as if he knew my every move. He just stared at me, slowly approaching my position. It was then that I knew I couldn't escape him. He was a cunning predator, always one step ahead. My friends and family thought I was losing my mind, but I knew the truth. This man had decided to make my life hell, without reason. I tried to report him to the police, but there was no tangible evidence. He always vanished before they could arrive. My sanity was fraying more and more every day. No one understood what I was going through, and the shadow of that man loomed over every aspect of my existence. Finally, the day came when I faced him again. This time, I was determined to put an end to this nightmare. With a knife in my pocket, I let him follow me through the subway tunnels, leading me into the darkness where it all began. Finally, he caught up with me in an abandoned subway room. I turned around and showed him my knife, trying to scare him. Furious and empowered by my knife, I threw myself at him. With a simple movement, he stopped my wrist and squeezed it until my knife fell out of my hand. Then he lifted his foot and gave me a strong kick in the chest that threw me several meters backward. Once on the ground, I tried to get up, but the pain was too much. By kicking me, the man had revealed his face for the first time. He was not a monster, he was not a being from another planet, and he was definitely nothing more than a person. Someone of flesh and bones like any of you. Despite this, it was terrifying. His face was badly scared from many other fights, and I could see he had a false eye. His long beard seemed to hide his mouth, which never seemed to smile. He might be a human, but a much stronger and more experienced human than me. There was no way I could beat him in a fight, knife or knife. I had a chance to escape, and I didn't waste it. I ran through the tunnels, leaving behind a dark figure now groaning in pain on the floor. I got out of the subway and didn't look back. The terror I had experienced did not disappear, but at least I was able to put some distance between me and him. I still don't know who that man was or why he decided to turn my life into a nightmare. But one thing was for sure. The subway, once my favorite mode of transportation, had become his favorite place to haunt me. I'm not going to lie to you. Today, he still follows me. I don't know who he is, and he never stops. Even when I'm with my friends and out of sight, I know he's out there, looking for an opportunity to attack me. Story 2. What is the first thing you think of when you see an old person? We all think they are nice grandparents who would never hurt anyone. I must admit that for the most part, this is somewhat true, but there are always exceptions. And I met the biggest exception you can imagine. I still remember like it was yesterday that winter day when I left work. I was heading towards my car parked in the garage. As I approached the vehicle, I noticed a cab parked across the street. The lights were flashing, revealing the figure of an old man in the driver's seat. I didn't pay much attention to him and continued on my way. But something in his gaze unsettled me. I started my car and pulled out onto the lonely road, thinking I was becoming paranoid. However, the cab followed me, keeping a constant distance. No matter how many turns I took or how many traffic lights I crossed, it was always there, following me. My heart began to pound as I tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe he was looking for a client. But as I made my way through the deserted streets, that uncertainty turned into certainty. I was being followed. I sped up, trying to lose the intruder, but the old man would not be left behind. The feeling that something was wrong came over me, and fear set in. Why was that man in a cab following me? Why was he speeding up more and more? Confused, I decided to park the car. If this man had something to tell me, this was his chance to do it. As soon as I parked my car on the road, the old man passed me and parked shortly after. I thought about getting out of the car, but I didn't have to. He got out of his cab with his walking stick. Couldn't he even walk? Then why was he following me? As soon as the man arrived, he started insulting. I tried to figure out what was going on, but without warning, he used the same stick to break my car window. Terrified, I started the car while the man hit him one more time, saying he would kill me if I didn't walk away. Without needing the walking stick, I watched as the man ran to his cab, once again turned it on, and continued to slowly stalk me. My only option was to get to the police station, which was a few miles away. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel as I drove to the police station. The old man showed no sign of stopping. I clung to the hope that the police would arrive in time and put an end to the chase. After a few kilometers, I noticed that it was getting dark. I was approaching the police station, but to my surprise, it was not where it should be. I thought I was getting close to the police station, but I realized something. I was lost. Surely the nerves of having escaped from this terrifying cab had made me take a wrong turn. To make matters worse, I had no idea where I was. I knew the police station from passing by a few times, but I really didn't know much about that neighborhood, as it was dangerous. I arrived at an abandoned area and had no choice but to get out of my car, since the only way to continue escaping was to backtrack. But the old man was behind me, slowly approaching. With no other options, I ran through the dark and deserted streets. The old man backed up and took another road, catching up with me without the need to get out of his vehicle. Apparently, he knew this place perfectly well. The lights of the vacant sign of the cab were closer and closer. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't stop. Now I was without my car, running away from a psychopath who had every advantage to catch up with me. I ran and ran aimlessly, desperately looking for a way out. I went into narrow, dark alleys, but the old man always found a way with his cab to catch up with me. Every time I stopped to catch my breath, the engine of his car roared. Finally, I came to a dead end, into which his cab fit perfectly. My lungs burned, and my legs barely responded. The old man was slowly approaching, enjoying my desperation. I looked around, searching for anything that could save me. That's when I saw a fire escape leading to a roof. Without a second thought, I ran up, ignoring the pain in my legs. As I reached the top, I realized that the old man could not follow me. From my elevated position, I watched helplessly as the old man got out of his vehicle and frantically circled the alley without finding a way to catch up with me. I breathed a sigh of relief for a brief moment, but the feeling of triumph faded when I saw his gaze fixed on me. Full of determination, I had no choice but to find help. I jumped off the roof and ran towards the main street, desperately looking for someone who could protect me. I heard the cab behind me once again. The sound of the engine was still haunting me, and my legs were still shaking. I ran as fast as I could, but there was nothing I could do. In one leap, I managed to dodge the car, but it hit a part of my body, and I went spinning to the side. With all my strength, I managed to get up once again and tried to keep running, but my body hurt too much. I think I had a broken bone. I couldn't even support my right leg to keep running. I thought I was already dead. I thought there was no way to escape from this old man who for some reason had decided to kill me. Before the cab ran over me, I had one last hope in front of me. I did not find the police, but the police found me. In the distance, I spotted a couple of police officers patrolling the area. I limped closer and watched as the cab accelerated at full speed towards me. I managed to dodge it by throwing myself to the side, but this time, I realized that the old man wasn't trying to kill me. He just accelerated to escape from the police. When they saw me on the ground, wounded and crying, I turned to them, explaining the situation in halting words. They looked in the direction of the old man, whose cab was already lost in the distance. The police officers promised to investigate the matter, but I got no clear answers as to who the old man was or why he was chasing me. Although I never met him again, the feeling of being watched never completely disappeared. My nights were filled with nightmares, reliving the chase over and over again. I couldn't help but look over my shoulder every time I went out. The memory of those headlights kept haunting me. That day I learned that evil can come in any form or person, and even from someone you would think was totally harmless. Story 3. Hello, my name is Elisa. I recently finished my college degree and graduated as what I always wanted to be, a librarian. When I was a child, my whole family was killed by a violent and brutal robbery at Christmas. The only reason I survived was because my parents hid me in time, and the robbers weren't very interested in finding me either. After that experience, I locked myself away in my parents' passion, books. While they were looking for families to adopt me, I was the quietest and most intelligent child at the foster care house. I read as many books as I could, and whenever I could. What at first was a way to get closer to my parents also became my passion. Besides, I knew that if any family saw me reading, they would surely choose me. Eventually, I realized that I wasn't wrong, although I wish I had been. The White family was the one chosen to adopt me. They seemed nice enough, although I must admit they were very disciplined. Maybe that's why they were interested in me when they found out that I liked to read. I hear everyone complaining about how difficult adoption is, and it surely is, but for people with as much money as the Whites, it wasn't. Before I could even begin to assimilate, I had to go through the adoption process. Before it could even begin to sink in that I was going to have a new family, they were already filling out the adoption papers. It scared me how quickly they did it. But at the time I was thankful, because I was sure I would have a secure future and a family to take me in. In the beginning, Adam and Miriam were very good parents. They were demanding, yes, but at the same time, they were very patient with my adjustment to this new life. Unfortunately, this did not last that long. The problem with many couples is that not all of them are ready to be parents and have welcomed me so quickly, they didn't even give themselves adequate time to assimilate. The Whites began to get bored with me, to regret adopting me. They became increasingly impatient with me. I didn't misbehave, not at all, but I made mistakes that were unacceptable to them, like doing the dishes wrong, not taking off my slippers when I entered the house, or not understanding a math exercise at the speed they would like. What started out as demanding parents soon turned into violent and abusive parents. The punishments were inhumane, and neither of them ever had any compassion for me. Eventually, I got used to it, but once we came back from shopping, in the middle of a public transport, everything came to an irreparable point. That day, Miriam felt a little guilty that her husband had left me without food all night. It was nothing she hadn't done before, but for some reason, that day she felt bad about doing it. As a way of asking for my forgiveness, the next day she took me to the library which her sister owned. They let me choose a book. Unlike her sister, my aunt was actually a very good person, and she didn't know at all about the things that went on in the house. Everything started out well. After choosing some books, I accompanied her to the supermarket to go shopping. The day went by pretty fast, and before I knew it, we were both at the supermarket, heading home. And that's when everything got out of control. The train was practically empty. Only a few people had shared the train a few minutes before, but they had already gotten off. Miriam seemed quite unfocused, really trying to do things right, but trying to hold back the anger at the slightest thing she did. I, on the other hand, was very engrossed in the books my aunt had lent me, so I was constantly taking them out, reading the first few pages, putting them back. It had been a long time since I had felt like that, like a child. And that certainly had its consequences. I accidentally threw away my adoptive mother's purchases, and at that moment I knew everything that was coming to me. Looking at the tomato cans on the floor and some broken bags, her face was slowly transforming. I tried to pick up his things, but I got nervous and dropped a few more things. Before I could continue trying to pick everything up, my foster mother grabbed my wrist and began to squeeze it violently. In reaction to what she had done, I started to cry, but this made her even angrier. Miriam covered my mouth with her hands and told me to stop screaming. She said I was screaming on purpose to make her look bad. Look bad with who? The train was empty. Without finishing with me, she grabbed my hair while I tried not to cry so as not to make noise, to which she responded by throwing me violently to another seat. As I stood up, still crying, she walked towards me slowly. Her eyes were red, and she was shaking with anger. I had never seen her so angry. I stood still, ready to receive my punishment, until I noticed something else. She had her home keys in her hand, and she was holding it like a weapon. The keys had a sharp tip. Did she want to stick it in me? My body froze with fear, and my only reaction was to run, no matter the punishment, no matter what might come next. Miriam started to chase me all over the train car, dodging all the seats and doors. Little by little, she ended up cornering me. I could see her clench the key in her hand. This was the end of me. Suddenly, I saw people running toward my adoptive mother. The train had cameras, and the drivers alerted the security guards about what was happening. They both stopped Miriam before she could do anything to me, and as they took her away, I fell down crying. As I cried, I could only hear her saying that this was my fault. Soon after that, my aunt found out about what happened. She asked social services if she could take care of me, and they agreed. That was the last time I saw them since my aunt also stopped talking to them. Something tells me that if my adoptive parents had wanted to, they could have kept me, but I feel that my aunt did them a big favor. Not that it hurt my feelings or anything, since she did that favor for me too. You know, a few years ago, I used to see my former parents' car drive by my house. I don't think they do it because they love me or miss me, but I feel there is something more to it. I feel like they think I'm running away from them, but that I'm still their property. It's like they have some strange obsession with me that my new foster mother understands, but never wanted to explain to me. Every time I see that car, I remember everything that happened to me in that house, and even worse, on that train ride. I still cry just remembering my childhood, but unlike that time, now I have a family that supports me. Thanks for watching. If you like the stories, remember to subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any other true disturbing stories. See you next video.